Welcome to the Black Knight Nation podcast. I'm your host, Sal Interdonato. The Black Knight Nation podcast is brought to you by Higher Echelon. Higher Echelon is a company run by Joe Ross, who's a former Army fullback, former Army assistant coach, former Army officer. We also had Joe on as a guest on the Black Knight Nation podcast. If you go to our YouTube channel, you could find Joe's interview in our archives. You could also find Seth Neiman's interview in our archives, Jody Glor's interview in our archives. We've had Mike Mayweather on. We've had a bunch of Army former Army players on the Black Knight Nation podcast. We really appreciate everybody stopping by. And tonight we have, I was thinking about this 50 years ago, the first Commander in Chief's trophy was contested. And the Army's first game in the Commander in Chief's Trophy series was a game between Air Force. And now you think of coming up on Saturday, Army and Air Force will play at Globe Life Field in Arlington, Texas. And the first time Army and Air Force met when the Commander and Chief's Trophy was at stake, Ed Francis and Bob Hines were playing in that game in 1972 at Michie Stadium. And guys, such an honor to have you on tonight to talk about that game, that season, that team. And thanks so much for joining us.
Oh, thank you, Sal. Great to be here.
Yeah, same with me.
Yeah. So I was talking to Ed before we came on the podcast, and I was telling him my only references to the 1972 team, why I was a beat writer, was the last Army team to beat a ranked team. That Air Force team was ranked number 19 in the country, and that's Army's last win over a ranked team. So you're going back 50 years now.
Right.
And I knew the score, and I knew some of the things that happened in that game. But then to see you guys, what was it, last Saturday? A bunch of players from the 1972 team be on hand at Michie Stadium, and in between, I believe, the third and fourth quarters, be honored for what you guys had accomplished. I was sitting in the stands and the upper deck, and to see the line of former players from that team, how long it was, and to see the ovation and the respect that you guys got, which is well deserved, was a really incredible experience for me. And I was just wondering, I don't know if you guys were there, but I mean, just what that year meant to. Maybe we could go to both of you guys and what that meant to you, the memories, and maybe if you were there during the honoring a couple weeks ago.
Yeah. Well, I'd go. To me, Sal, 50 years went by very quickly, but what really made it go by quickly was that I get to see a lot of our teammates almost every year at the AFC golf tournament or other events. So we were a very close team. No matter what we did, we're always getting together whenever we can. And like I said, every year our team has the most people come back to the AFC tournament. We have at least 20, 23, 25 people, 28 people some years. So I think every year we had the most people come back. So we are a very close team. And anyway, that's one of the things that I mostly remember is that we stuck together as a team. Win or lose, we stuck together.
Ed, what are your memories? About the team?
That especially that last year, 72, the highs and lows were absolutely insane. I personally broke my leg about 2 weeks before the season, so I had to recover or recuperate before getting back on the field about halfway through the year. But going through on the sidelines, the low of Nebraska, and then the high of Texas A&M, and that was the way that season went. We had highs and lows, and we won the games we should have won. We lost a couple of games that we could have won. And we had a couple of tough games against Penn State and Nebraska, but I will never forget the atmosphere that preceded the Air Force game at the Academy. It was the most intense time in the 4 years we were there. People were fired up. Air Force was ranked and had a couple All-Americans. They were supposed to kill us, as was Navy when we played Navy. So it was a great great time. And the other guy you have in this this podcast right now was the primary reason we were successful in both the Air Force and Navy game, because between the two of them, I think he almost had 400 yards by himself. So that doesn't happen in many games. Most backs don't get 400 yards in a season, let alone in 2 games, the most important games in your life.
In those games, right? I mean, the service academy games usually, even I'm guessing back then, right? Both teams knew the schemes, right? You scouted each other well, and those were like, you look at your game, 17-14 against Air Force. You know, it was I think it was 24-15 against Navy.
Yep.
Those games are tight games. They're, every play, every snap counts type of games. And Bob, I mean, you were like Ed was saying. I guess you got to still have fond memories of those Air Force and Navy games of '72, right?
Yes, we do. And as Ed will recall, most of that year we played in the rain, or Mikey Stadium was a very muddy field. And we only played 10 games that year. But, I mean, that's one of the things I mostly remember. I was moved to I-back that week due to an injury of Bruce Simpson, because the week before we went to an I formation. I was the fullback and Bruce was the halfback. And John Makovic, if you recall him, he was our backfield coach, moved me back to tailback after Bruce got hurt. But being a sloppy field was conducive to my type of running. But without doubt, I couldn't have had that many rushes if it weren't for our defense. They had, I believe, they intercepted 6 times that day.
Yeah.
And our offensive line,
yeah,
we went 3 yards in a cloud of mud,
That cloud of mud, yeah.
And that was our strategy that day, just to keep the ball away from, I think their quarterback was Haney, or I forget their quarterback's name, but to keep the ball away from them, because as you mentioned, Air Force was number 19 that year. And we had to keep the ball away from them. But it was truly a team effort.
Yeah, I guess 49-yard touchdown right in the fourth quarter for Bob to give Army the lead, and Army would help hold on to it. And you guys talked about how anticipated that game was, right? And you look back at some of the recent Air Force and Army games that are going down to the wire. Last year's game was an overtime game, right? And it seems like, the last 2 times I just wrote about it, Army's been the underdog like for 4 straight years now against Air Force, and they've won the last 2, and they're looking for 3 in a row against Air Force. And I guess, like you said, you guys were, I guess, considered the underdog against Air Force in your 72 game. And I guess the mentality in the locker room, right? I mean, can you guys describe what that was like pregame, and then maybe, I don't know, did you guys sing the alma mater back then after wins too?
No.
And what was the you didn't. So what was like the post game like? What was pregame and post game like for in that game?
Well, pregame, we always went on a team walk, whether at that trophy point or was it the Washington Monument somewhere?
Yeah.
But where Steve Bogosian, our captain, gave us a speech, and Tom Cahill, of course, gave us a little talk. But generally, before the game, once in the locker room, Cahill did his normal speech. Backs get up and run, linemen block, and defense tackle, and but keep your heads up and give 110% every play, and that basically was a speech. But the remainder was really left up to us to stick as a team, and everybody give 110% and just go out there and play your best.
I think my recollection of that whole thing was that we had some good coaches. John Makovic, he mentioned, and we had a sort of advisor coach, Bill Carpenter, who's the lonesome end, who was really probably one of the most inspirational people who was around us. But for the most part, our coaches weren't really the inspiring type, I would say. For sure, Tom Cahill was more of a field general type. He seemed, not going to get you fired up to run down the onto the field. But it was pretty much left up to you what you thought and what you how what your constitution was. I'll say, going out there on the field. So it was not. When I see Coach Monken today, I'm very impressed with what he does to get people united and fired up and almost give them a mission statement going down the tunnel, or whatever.
Yeah, I guess you guys, when you're looking at a coach, like you say, to get the team rallied and stuff like that, Monken, no doubt, has done that with the program. Guy, guys would probably love to play for. I'm guessing, right? A guy that you would definitely want
to.
Yeah, it's definitely an aspiring coach.
Yeah. I mean, the weird thing is that the way we played the game was really kind of like an option offense in that we didn't want to throw the ball. We wanted to run the ball. And that was obvious. We thought that when you threw the ball, it was like showing your weakness. And, we wanted to pound it down the field. And that's kind of what suits our mentality at Army, right?
Yeah, no doubt. I was going to ask you guys about the rivalry. Was there, because that's the first Commander-in-Chief's trophy game between Army and Air Force, but was that the start of the rivalry, do you think? I mean, because now you coming up on Saturday, right? Army and Air Force don't like each other, obviously. The coaches really don't like each other now. The players, have, what do you think? Was it that way back then, or was it starting to be that way back then, or was it a friendly rivalry? How would you describe it?
I don't recall rivalry being that aggressive with Air Force. Definitely with Navy it was, but Air Force, I forget what year we started playing Air Force every year, but previous to that, it was every other year, I think.
Yeah, right.
Then Commander-in-Chief's trophy, they started every year playing, but definitely the larger rivalry was with Navy, in my opinion. But we definitely wanted to beat Air Force because they were ranked highly in the nation that year, and we thought, well, we can make a name for ourselves by beating them. And if I recall that year, we did not lose 2 games in a row that year. When, of course, we lost 4, but they were spread out throughout the year.
You're dead right. You're dead right. Yep.
Yeah, I was looking at we talked about your guys' schedule. Nebraska to open, Texas A&M at number 15, Penn State, played Miami on the road, played Air Force at home, played Syracuse, then played Navy too. So I mean, it was a schedule that nowadays, if that was those 3 or 4 Power Fives were on Army's schedule in the season, I mean that'd be a pretty attractive schedule these days. And back then, I mean, like Ed, you mentioned your sophomore year, your introduction to Army football or college football. Can you go over that with us and where you played your first 4 games of your college career?
Yeah. Well, as I was telling you, my recollection is going on the road to play Penn State, Tennessee, Nebraska, and Notre Dame. So it was a rough sledding, and the only good thing for us as sophomores at the time was that it depleted the varsity. There were a lot of guys who got hurt. And that was what gave me my first opportunity against Notre Dame. And it was totally unexpected. So it was a war of attrition that year, and I think we ended up 1-9-1, right, Bob?
Yeah, we tied Oregon.
Yeah. So it was a really tough year, and it was hard to keep your head up, because it was we were getting pounded pretty good.
Yeah, it was when we have guest former Army football players on this podcast, we always ask them how their road to West Point and how they were recruited or how they found out about Army. Bob, do you recall how you got to West Point?
Yes, I was recruited by Bob Mishak, and I also was recruited by Navy, and I almost went to Penn State. If you recall John Capoletti, John went to a fellow competitor high school of mine in Philadelphia Catholic School District. He went to Monsignor Bonner, and I went to St. James. I was a year ahead of him. but we're both on an all-Catholic team. That's how I got to meet John. But anyway, I was recruited by Joe Paterno at Penn State, but ultimately decided that I would either go to Navy or Army. And I told my parents that I would go to the first academy that accepted me and gave me a letter. And it so happened that I received a letter from Army one day prior to the letter coming in from Navy. So,
Wow.
yeah, so that's how it went. But of course, where I lived, Navy would have been like a 2-hour drive, and West Point was being like a 4-hour drive. So,
yeah. And how about do you have a recruiting story to share?
Yeah, I do. I when I was a sophomore, my friends were over my house at the end of the year that year, and they said to me that they were going to something called Boys State, and they wanted to know if I wanted to go at University of Connecticut. I grew up in Connecticut, and so I had no idea what the hell it was really, but we went to Boys State for a week to learn, what government is like and how to participate in government and so forth. But at Boys State, there was a cadet who basically spoke to the male participants of Boys State, and at the end of it, he handed out postcards, to send stuff in. So to have information come to you about the admissions process and so forth. So I took one of the cards and I mailed it in. Over the next year, I started to get all kinds of. I mean, they were mailing me something like once a week, it seemed. My parents were getting a little bit excited. Football for me at that point, junior year we were okay, and I played. I was starting as a junior, but we ended up 6-4 that year. But it was very much the same thing that happened to me at West Point, and that is that our class in my high school was a dominant class. We ended up that when we got to be seniors, there were no two-way players. We were all playing only one way. We had so much talent that we were able to do that, and very few schools in our division would do that. So we ran up crazy scores, and we got national attention. We scored 520 something points in 9 games. We're ranked number 1 in Connecticut, number 1 in New England, and number 5 in the country, behind teams from Florida, California, Texas, and one other. Anyway, Ohio. So that got us a lot of attention. And being a public school, there really weren't a lot of guys who had great grades. So I got a lot of attention as a function of being the leading pass receiver on that team. So I had a ton of schools coming after me, mostly Ivy League, frankly, but Army was one of them. And it kind of, I'd already been thinking about Army because of all the information they'd been sending me. So that's how I got there.
That's and I guess so when you guys enter West Point as freshmen, right? Freshmen are still not allowed to play varsity, right? So
no.
There's a plebe team, or what's that? What's your freshman experiences like? Are you a scout team, or what are you guys doing?
They had a plebe team at the time, and I think George Stork was the head coach of the plebe team. But we're basically meat for the varsity. But when we skirmished them, and prior to the Navy game, they brought a lot of plebes up, and we practiced with the varsity at Mikey Stadium. So, but no, we had a separate schedule.
Gotcha. So you were kind of the scout team for the Navy game, so to speak, your freshman year, or no?
Yeah, basically. Yeah, us and they had a JV team as well, so we're like the scout team. So,
and I guess then that is there spring practice your freshman year going into your sophomore year? Is there spring practice, and what are those? Ed, what do you remember from that? And like you said, just kind of you're kind of waiting your turn, so to speak, and trying to also show that you're capable of getting some playing time back then.
Well, it's a crazy. I'm not sure what it's like today, but in those days, it was a little bit crazy. As I recall, we were limited to 22-hour practices for spring, and a practice was defined as a player, a coach, and a ball. So leading up to that, we had 2 alternating days of training that we would do. And one day was called the room, and the other day was called the stairs. I got this right, Bob? That's the way it was, right?
Yep.
So when we go to the room, it was basically 1/2 hour in the wrestling room upstairs, and it was organized combat. There were 5 or 6 drills you'd do, wrestling stick stuff. I mean, just monkey drills where you're rolling. I mean, it was the most intense half hour of our lives at that time.
Continual movement. Yeah.
Yeah, continual. And you came out of there just completely exhausted and, wondering why you were doing this. And the other thing was the stairs, where I think there were 6 stories in the gym at that time. And the stories were probably 20 feet tall. So we would get on the stairs, those 6 stories, and you'd have to go up and down and perform whatever they were telling you. We were hopping. You were at some point you were actually going to carry a person who was your weight up the stairs, those 6 stories. So it was another, half hour of total chaos that at the end of it, you knew you'd gone through the thing. So that led up to spring practice. And by the time you got to spring practice, those 20 sessions were a lot more fun and a lot easier than what you just went through, and a lot more meaningful than what you did.
In those days, Sal, there was no weight program, weight training.
Right.
I believe our gym there had 1 or 2 weights, and we had wait in line like 20 deep and do curls or whatever. There was no Nautilus machines or anything like that, And it wasn't just us. I remember talking to a friend of mine at Penn State at the time when we played Penn State, and they did not have a weight training program either in the early 70s. And that's when they had Franco Harris and Lionel Mitchell.
Yeah.
I look at like today, right? They're doing mat drills and they're out on Foley Athletic Center, and it might be like winter like temperatures and the teams together, and it's a bonding. It's a team bonding more just as much as it is like getting in shape and that kind of football shape, so to speak. Did you guys consider that team bonding when you're doing that stuff, or what? I mean, because I'm guessing that's pretty tough, and like I guess they're trying to find who's the strongest players, not just physically but also mentally too in those sessions. I'm guessing too. So.
Yeah, I would say so. It was tough, and we all had we kept each other up. If anybody got down, the other person had to bring the person up. Get them up mentally, because physically it was tough. It was mentally. If you were tough, you made it through.
Yeah, so. Yeah. I actually during that time developed the sort of mentality that around everything that happened after that, and that was that you could ruin a day thinking about what was going to happen in the room or on the stairs that day. I mean, you could literally worry yourself to be sick. And I learned to kind of compartmentalize it so that, I was going to go in there, and 30 minutes later I was going to come out. That was going to happen. So just forget about what happens in between. Don't think about it. And that's the way I've treated everything in life since then. It's whether it's some surgery or whatever you're going to go into, you're going to go into it, and you're going to come out, and everything's going to be fine.
Yeah, what's hard to imagine, Sal, was like Ed mentioned, there were 5 or 6 stations, and each station was a couple minutes long. They timed it, and there was a coach at each station, and it was just continual yelling, and it was an enclosed train, a wrestling room, enclosed. It was hot, tough to breathe in there, and just people yelling at you, and we couldn't wait to get out. But
doors are probably closed. The heat's turned up, and you guys are like, yeah. I don't know. I can't imagine it back then. Can you guys tell me, maybe I just want to ask you this, and maybe we'll get into more of that 72 season. What? Yeah, and you talked about the coaching staff there, and from what I've talked to what we talked to Jody Glore about too, Tom Cahill surrounded himself with a good staff, right?
He did.
And I was wondering, who was the most influential coach for you at Army, and who was the guy maybe you learned most about, not only on the football field, but maybe outside of football? Because Army football players always talk about, what they learned on the football field in West Point, how it carried on to them in their service time. I was wondering, with that kind of staff, who might have been the guys who you might have learned from the most?
Well, we were fortunate, I think, as freshmen and even sophomores. Bill Parcells and Al Groh, you probably heard those names before.
Yeah.
They were coaches there, but I would say for me, John Makovic came in, I believe, my junior year, and John was a quarterback Wake Forest for when Brian Piccolo was there, and John was kind of I won't say a quiet guy, but he motivated you by not really yelling at you, but just trying to talk to you to be a better player. And but he was very very high on being technical, doing the right thing. But he was fun to speak to because he had a lot of experience. And as you know, after he left us, he went to Dallas, head coach of Kansas City Chiefs, head coach of Texas, Arizona State, Wake Forest, I believe. But he definitely had a lot of skill. But I learned a lot from John, and even from a coaching technique, just the way he was. So I have to say John Makovic.
Was there somebody for you?
I agree. John was he was a good coach, and I liked being around him. But for me, it was Bill Carpenter. I mean, he spent a lot of time around the ends, and he sort of transcended, football, the military, and just life in general. He had been to war, had won the Silver Star, was a true warrior, but he was a great football player too. And he had a really understated way of criticizing you and motivating you. He was never intense about it, but and he was always there for me. He was always outside of football. He was always providing me with support and direction, I'll say. But just a great guy, and I still talk to him on the phone regularly now, as do some of our other teammates.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Stoic and a rare sense of humor.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Those 58 team, right? Yeah, we talked about, we had Pete Dawkins on our podcast, and that team, the talent on that team. I believe Bob Anderson's also on that team, and Bob Novogratz, I believe, is also on that team. And you look at Bill Carpenter, and I mean, wow, I mean. There's a reason why they went undefeated that year. Yeah, right. I mean, that's even like holy cow. The fact that they did have to do that is amazing.
Yeah.
Now maybe we can touch on the 72 season. I know we talked about it a lot. We're jumping all over the place, but it's great to hear your stories, guys. If you're watching right now and you have any comments or questions, please feel free to send them in, and we'll post them and we'll try to answer them. So we talked about the start, right, in Nebraska and Johnny Rodgers coming in, and I just want to maybe get your guys' opinions about how the team was able to bounce back, because I Seth Mendelson covers the team for us on Black Knight Nation. He has a deep history of watching the team back into the 60s, and he said you guys were like double-digit underdogs at least against Texas A&M, right, for that next game. Mm-hmm. And can you just maybe, if you guys like to share your memories about how you guys were able to bounce back and really put a hurting on Texas A&M the next week?
Yeah. Well, I guess, as Ed mentioned, we lost to Nebraska 77-7. It was a national televised game, as I recall, and it was Nebraska's third game.
Right.
I believe it was our first. Yeah, it definitely was our first.
Yeah.
But I would say after losing, we had a hard practice that week, and the coaches, they weren't, well, I would have to say they expected us to lose. We worked hard. We wanted to play our best, but we did not expect to win. I mean, I'm sure the coaches did not expect to win either. But next week's practice is very hard, and we just all kept our heads up, and we weren't. We worked hard that week, and we went down to Texas A&M to just say we're going to play our best, and hopefully we're going to come out of that game with a win. It was a Friday night game, and we came out for the win. Everybody played hard, and we won. Now Nebraska, the first play, Bob Portine was the other starting back, broke his wrist and was out for the season. And I forget who their All-American center was, the defensive center.
Rich Glover.
Oh,
yeah.
Bob ran into him first play, and he was out for the season. That game I was playing flanker, and Makovic moved me back to halfback Texas A&M game, and that's where I stayed the rest of the year.
Yeah, I guess like you said, you were injured right early in the season, right? So, you were on the sidelines for the Texas A&M game or no?
Oh yeah, I only played half the year, the last half of the year. I did actually, and I don't remember why it happened this way, but I traveled with the team, and I was down there on the field at the game. It was the environment was unique. It was so intense, and we came out. Our team came out with just an intensity about them, and played that way the whole game. It was. I think my impression, not playing at the time, but my impression just being around the guys was that everybody knew that if we couldn't beat Texas A&M, it was going to be a bad year. And as Bob said, the Nebraska thing was hitting a freight train that was already running, and trying to play a team like that on their third game, year first, was impossible. It really was. It was. I don't know who scheduled that, but it was crazy. So Texas A&M became a do or die, really, and we did.
Yeah, I guess Bob, being a part of that game on the field, do you think that Texas A did you think that you surprised them, or did you think that you said you were the better team, no doubt, but you think that the kind of, because they're probably seeing the score of the week before, and do you think that you just were the better, tougher team that day, or what were your impressions of that?
Well, we definitely were. I'm sure after they watched the game film of the Nebraska game, they probably thought we were going to be a cakewalk. But we went into the game, the offensive played hard, and the defensive played. They had quite a few interceptions, quite a few sacks. They played real hard, and we together as a team won. And as Ed mentioned, the stadium was rocking, with their core cadets, and it was a night game. It was a crazy atmosphere, and as I mentioned, that week we worked very hard. But when we got down there that Thursday before the game, we stayed at some country club, and it was very loose. We had golf carts we were running around, yeah. Having fun, and the coaches saw that, but they made it very light because they didn't want to put a lot of pressure on us, especially after losing to Nebraska. But definitely, I was happy for them because they were very happy after we won and we upset Texas A&M. You just see the glimmer in their eyes that they had a decent team.
How many teams these days go out and play golf the day before a big game like that, right? Or just even if you're guys that were just messing around a little bit on the golf court, it doesn't happen a lot these days.
Oh
right?
no, we were in golf carts. We weren't playing golf.
No,
you were okay.
We're running around the golf course.
No, the way we were situated, there was these little villas, and we were staying in a dispersed. We weren't like in a hotel. We were spread all over the place.
I got
and the only way to get from one place A to B was on a golf cart. We all had golf carts.
I got you. Sorry, my misinterpretation. But I mean, so we talked about how the season, you guys, it was a season where you had a tough schedule, right? And you guys may have had some setbacks here and there, but you didn't let that kind of get to you. You guys never lost back-to-back games. And then you're looking at, we talked about the Air Force game already. Are there any memories from the Rutgers game from any of you guys, or was that just? I mean, I see 35-28 in there. Is there any kind of stories from that game or leading up or after?
Go ahead, man.
Not really. I think that was the first time we played Rutgers in a long time, as I recall, and we played them in Brunswick, New Jersey, I believe it was.
Yep.
But it was basically a good quality game. Offensive, we had a good day. In fact, that game, Bruce Simpson and I both had over 100 yards. First time two backs had over 100 in I don't know how many years. But I remember Bruce having a 79-yard run. He took off, and but it was a good game. Yeah, we threw a lot. I think Dusty Triplett caught a touchdown pass there, but it was a good game. You know, as you mentioned, we only won by a touchdown or two, but it was a good, fun game.
Yeah, I also see, you guys had wins over Lehigh and Holy Cross, and then we get to the Navy game, 23-15 game for Army win. That game was probably high stakes, right? You knew the Commander-in-Chief's trophy was going to be on the line in that game. And I'm guessing because you talked about the Texas A&M game, the atmosphere there, right? You played at Penn State. I'm guessing the Penn State atmosphere was pretty good back then, and also that Air Force game and how just it was very the the circumstances surrounding that game, the great atmosphere there. Do you guys feel already prepared for the Army Navy game? Probably always definitely said Bob, your biggest rival, right? Now you have the Commander-in-Chief's trophy also on the line too. Do you guys feel like you were ready as far as the atmosphere and what was on the line, that you guys were prepared for everything you went through during the season?
Yeah, I think so. We had a week layoff between, I think, Holy Cross, or Lehigh was our last game.
It was Holy Cross.
Holy Cross. And we didn't play that well against Holy Cross, but we finally won.
We were lucky to win that one.
Yeah, we were lucky. I remember we remember getting chewed out at halftime by the coaches because we were not playing well. But the second half we came back. Then we had a week off. We practiced hard, but we knew the Commander-in-Chief's trophy was on the line. And to be honest, I know from the offensive perspective, we did not play well the first half. I think we only had maybe less than maybe a dozen plays. Navy really held the ball most of the half.
Yeah.
And I remember Bob Mishak just chewing out the whole offense. And but fortunately, second half defense, Joe Filoni had an interception, and then we scored, and Tim Feaster had that blocked field goal, and Scott ran the ball for a touchdown, and we finally won. But the first half was not good for us, particularly the offense. And thank God the defense held Navy to a few points they had.
Yeah, that's one thing that I think was almost a consistent aspect throughout our 2 years that we played, our junior and senior years, and that's that the defense turned the ball over a lot for us. They really did. And the Navy and Air Force games, I mean, there was 6 interceptions in Air Force. I don't know how many they had in the Navy, but the turnover at with the field goal was a game-changing event. But what I remember the most about that game was literally sitting down the night before and writing a letter to myself that someday I'm going to read, basically to say, what's going to happen between now and then, but this is the last time you're going to put this uniform on, and it's been a nice run, that kind of thing, and play your butt off.
In those days, Sal, we had wooden goalposts.
Yeah, which I have a piece of.
Yeah. And one of these days, I'll share a story about Ed and his ghost blocking.
If it wasn't for my downfield blocking during that Navy game, he wouldn't have had 50 yards, honestly.
There's a story, if you remember, there's a story about the ghost at West Point. It was in the old division, 47th division. I lived in the room next door to the so-called ghost room, which it kept vacant. Okay, and everybody said that the ghost is blocking for me that game. But there's a picture, I think it was in a Philadelphia Bulletin or something. I was running for the touchdown, and Ed was out there. You're split end, and he was blocking, but there wasn't anybody within 10 yards away, but he was blocking. So I call that the ghostly block. He was in a blocking position, so I always give him heck for that.
What do you think about that? That is,
well, what he doesn't know that picture actually is also part of a video that's out there, and that video is him running for a touchdown, and I'm literally coming across behind him, and there's two guys that are chasing him, and I don't block them. I just run across in front of him. So he doesn't really, he keeps busting him on me about, I'm blocking nobody. But when you see the video, you see what happened.
definitely helped you score there, Bob, no doubt.
That's right.
He was out there, but he it wasn't necessarily the fastest guy out there.
So afterwards, right, you win the Navy game 23-15. You capture the first Commander-in-Chief's trophy. What's post game like? There is a trophy ceremony there. I mean, are you guys? There is no trophy ceremony.
No, it was no big deal at that time. It really wasn't that big of a deal. The trophy itself and the Commander-in-Chief that I recall, I don't remember that being any kind of a deal for us. It was part of, sort of a natural process that happened because we beat both teams. But I don't remember there being any big deal, other than, hey, we won the first Commander-in-Chief's trophy. But, okay, great. But now, over time, it's become more and more important.
Yeah, because there was no trophy presentation on the field. It was a few weeks later. I think we had a dinner at the mess hall that the trophy was presented.
Right.
The mess hall, you guys got the trophy.
Yeah. Pardon?
You get the trophy at the mess hall. Wow.
Yeah, I believe that's where they brought it in. But I remember we had a dinner for the team, and but the trophy is definitely impressive. I sent you a picture of it, and when you see it, it's a very impressive trophy.
Yeah, no doubt. And so now I guess that earns you a trip to the White House. Back then you guys did not go to the White House, I'm guessing.
No.
No. It was Nixon. Was Nixon president?
It was Nixon, yeah.
Nixon, yeah.
Wow.
He had other things going on at the time.
That's true. Hey, what, just maybe to cap this off, I know, Ed, are there any stories that maybe I have one more last question to ask both of you guys, but are there any stories that you'd like to share about that season, your time, that maybe we didn't talk about?
Geez. Well, I would just say that I reached a point at the end of my at the end of practice the summer before sophomore year, and I was about to give up. I just didn't think I was going to get there, because when we had freshman ball, there were so many guys out there, and there were so many receivers, so many quarterbacks. I think we were 5 or 6 deep in quarterbacks, and we were probably 7 or 8 deep in receivers and so forth. And I felt a little lost, but I just stuck in there, and I actually told my parents I thought I was going to hang them up. And then that game happened that I told you about with the B squad, where Dick Atha and I both played with the B squad, and things turned around. And I mean, I talk to my kids about that kind of thing all the time, that you just don't know what's right around the corner for you. Because my life went, in my opinion, from a football standpoint, from, I'm just about out of this, to all of a sudden I'm in the big time. And so it was, I just thankful that I stayed in there that extra couple of days, or week or so. And I try to always use that when I talk to my kids about, you don't know what's around the corner. Hang in there a little while longer, do your best and see what happens. But I certainly got lucky, and it led to the best time of my life, playing with guys like this.
Yeah. Was there anybody that convinced you to stick around for a couple more days, or was it just on your own intuition?
No. I didn't feel like there was anybody I could even talk to. There was at that point I hadn't really even started the relationship with Major Carpenter at that time, and because I wasn't, I'll say I wasn't worthy. Really, I didn't feel that way. It just so no, it was a very lonely feeling. Actually, I remember that. So,
what's maybe a memory that that comes to mind for you just about your time at West Point? Because I was going to ask you guys about how you think the 72 team should be remembered. How you think you guys should be remembered. Because I think that like I said, you being honored recently at an Army home game was a great moment, a great thing. But I was just wondering how you feel your team should be remembered, that 72 team.
Well, after seeing the current Army teams and they're playing 11, 12, sometimes 13 games, we kind of always wish we had the extra 2-3 games to play. And last 2 years we were 6-4, and as you know, winning 6 games, you're entitled to a ball game anymore. But of course, there's a million ball games anymore. But we didn't have the opportunity to go to a ball game. But my basic vivid memory is again just getting smacked by Nebraska, then having the big win against Texas A&M. I think that's what really drove our season. Having that win, giving us the purpose, knowing that we were a good team, we could win some big games, and have a very successful senior year. But it wouldn't be successful unless we beat both Air Force and Navy, which we did. So to us, it was a successful year.
I would add one thing to that, and that is that you really have to go back and put yourself in the historical context of that time in America, because
Sure.
when we all signed up for the academy, I remember folks in my high school class who looked at me sideways, basically being against the war and being against the military and so forth. And while they had respect for the school, the military was not thought of well. So we went into a school that for most people, or for a lot of people, was not in its, I'll say, zenith of public opinion. So we spent a lot of time in there and had a lot of strange things happen. Like at Boston, I remember at Boston College, we saw that riot down in the center of Boston after a game we played there, where cars were overturned and burned, police cars. It was a crazy time in this country, and the military was not well thought of. So, we were kind of, a little bit isolated, a little bit, off the mainstream, and I think that helped us to sort of coalesce as a group. We all felt a little bit, like we were on the other side, and there was another world out there that was different from us. So. Yeah. It was a big deal for us in those days. It was not, the moratorium was happening and so forth, and we stuck together. So
I know in the last weekend I was talking to a few fellow players, and I always said in 67 that the Department of the Army turned down Army going to the Sugar Bowl.
Right.
And I always thought if they played in the Sugar Bowl, it would help recruiting a little more, even though Vietnam was happening, as you were talking about, Ed. And if we would have had another three decent players, 3 more over above what we had, we could have probably been 8-2, no doubt in my mind.
We just had a couple of receivers, right?
It's with the injuries and all. I mean, no, but another 3 or 4, better caliber type players, we could have been 8-2. But that's just.
Yeah, I was gonna just close this out about how much did football help you guys during your service time? Because like you said, it's things are happening, and then once you graduate West Point, you go into your active duty time. I was just wondering, like, how being an Army football player might, because you see this famous plaque that gets touched every time Army steps on the field. And just wondering how that helped you out maybe during your service time, or if you have any thoughts on that.
Well, I think a lot of people recognize that because in the Army, I know other platoon leaders, they played for Oklahoma State, or they were in ROTC but played for other schools. So you always had that camaraderie. Now, I'll tell you, the beginning, the first year, right after our basic course, after we graduated, I went to Ranger School, and playing football did not help me because the NCO Jacks knew you played football and they were on you. So they just made it worse for you. They made it as hard as they could. So, but
any thoughts on that?
Yeah, the way it helped me was I was really lucky when I was being recruited. The guy from Connecticut, who was the local West Point grad, was a guy who had been captain of the 52 team, which was the team where Red Blake's son and a whole bunch of that class had been thrown out on an honor violation. And this guy, his name is Al Polikas, who's now in the West Point Athletic Hall of Fame. He took an interest in me and was taking me up to West Point. After I got out of the service, I spent only 6 years in. He helped me find my first job, and he hooked me up with a guy named Bob St. Onge at a company that made turbine engines. And Bob St. Onge was the captain, the most valuable player on the national championship team that had Blanchard and Davis on it. So,
wow.
And that just started this whole series of events where it seemed as though at every fulcrum or every node of my career, I was somehow cycling back to an Army football player, or at least an academy guy, and it was helping me, and it helped me all the way through my career. I had 3 major changes in my career, and they were all they all worked out very well, and there were academy graduates or football players in most cases involved in that. So it was for me, it just kept coming back and paying dividends. It's great.
Yeah, we talk a lot about the Army Football Brotherhood and how strong it is, and how it passes through generations and generations, and how some players who played 20, 30 years ago are connecting with current players through letters, and just keeping that line going. And when you guys go play the Army Football Club golf outings too, that's another thing, right? When you see the different players from each decade, so to speak, of Army football. And I've gone to those socials the Friday night before the golf outings, and they're really special times to see the history of the program, right? And man, you guys were certainly an important part of the history of the program yourselves, that 72 team. Like we said, the first team to win the Commander-in-Chief's trophy in its first year competition. And now here goes Army, 50 years later, looking to win the first leg of the Commander-in-Chief's trophy Saturday against the Air Force. Ed and Bob, we really appreciate your time tonight, sharing your stories. It was great having you on. Guys, please check out our YouTube channel for Black Knight Nation. You can see interviews like this. Give us a like, subscribe to our YouTube channel, check out our social media, check out blackknightnation.com. Just had some stories on the line. Army is underdogs, guys, by 6.5 on Saturday against Air Force. So we'll see how that goes.
Hey, we were too.
Never know.
Right? Same thing. 50 years later, it's the same thing, and we'll see how it goes for the Black Knights. But guys, thanks so much for your time, and look forward to speaking to you guys down the road. And it's been awesome having you guys on.
All right, thanks a lot, Sal. Appreciate it.
Sal. Yep, and it was great to see you too, Bob. I know we don't see each other very much, though.
That's right. Same here.
Take care.
Thank you.